have a chat with them. So there will be more information on that made available from our website, and we'll be sending that out to you. One of the key things we really want to do from all of these sessions, though, is to get your feedback, and also, for you to feel that they're not just it's not just today. And if you do feel that you need any more support on any of the topics, then please get in touch with Paula or myself, and we'll see how we can support you going forward. Um, as there's quite a few people on the session today, we're not going to do a whole round of introductions. So what we actually ask you to do is to put your name and which project you're from in the chat. And then we can all, ideally say hello and put some comments in there together. Um, what I'm now going to do is hand over to Mandy Chambers, who's worked with us as a consultant on Feeding Derbyshire for many years. And Mandy's just going to give you an overview of the session, and then hand over to Paul, who's also supporting us today. So over to you, Mandy.
Yes, thanks, Charlotte. Thank you for that. Yes, it's 5 years almost, and I only came for 6 months, so that just goes to show what a lovely program it is to work on. So hello everybody. I think I know some people who are in the room today, but not everyone. So nice to see you all. Yeah, as Charlotte says, I've been working with Feeding Derbyshire for a while now, and one of the things that has emerged, as Charlotte says, is that we need to support projects with specific issues, and one of the issues that came out was around financial management. So Paula and myself have put together this programme today. What I will say is, I'll let Paul can speak for himself, I'm sure, but he probably won't. He won't sort of blow his own trumpet. But Paul's a business advisor of many years' experience. Paul and I have worked together in Bolsover for quite a while now, where he's supported many local businesses and also community and voluntary sector organisations. So he's got considerable experience of the work that he's going to be talking to you about today. So I hope you're going to find that useful. Obviously, the first bit is Paul's input, and then there will be an opportunity at the end for us to do questions. So what I would ask you, Charlotte's just said to you, put your name and project in the chat box. If you do that first, but as we go through the session, if you've got any questions for Paul or just some general things you'd like answering, then what I would suggest is that you pop those in the chat box. We'll look at those as we're going along, and then we'll try and deal with as many of them as we can in that last 15-20 minutes. I'll try and group them so that Paul has the opportunity to answer as many as possible. And obviously Charlotte and myself will be chipping in with that as well, and Paula. So yeah, I think that's enough from me, Charlotte. I'll hand over now to Paul. As I said, I've done a little bit of an introduction, but he can tell you more about his work if he wishes to do so. So over to you then, Paul. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, and good morning, or no, good afternoon, everybody. We're not doing introductions, but there's a couple of faces there I know. David Spencer, I haven't seen you in 100 years. How are you doing? And Jack DeVoe, it looks like you're sitting in the middle of a cold warehouse there with your scarf around your neck. So hopefully you'll be warm enough. What I'm going to do is just load up a few slides for us to work through. So in doing that, if you can just give me a thumbs up if that's come up okay. Yeah, okay. Right, so we're seeing that.
Looks good, Paul.
Let me just see if I can get the pictures of you back. That's great. Okay. Okay, so topic today, the title I was given here, profit and loss analysis. I will just give you a bit of background about myself before we go on any further. My own background, I started my working life in the commercial sector. I was there for sort of 20 plus years working with various organisations before then moving on to the third sector some 20 plus years ago. And I know you're looking at me and thinking, well, how on earth can you be old enough to have done that many years working in various businesses? But what I've been doing the last sort of 20 plus years, but primarily working with supporting local enterprise growth. So working with people who are starting up businesses, who have got existing businesses and they're growing them, but also through that advising and supporting various community organisations as well. And this is sort of mostly in the sort of northeast Derbyshire area. I also run a couple of community organisations where one of which Jack will be very familiar with, Lounsey Green Community Trust, a community centre near to here. We've been running that for about 15 years now. I was running a community radio station for a while. So I've sort of got feet in a couple of camps there. Over the time that I've been doing this, we've sort of helped around about sort of 1,000+ individuals to start, grow organisations, and for those businesses to survive. The one thing I will just say is I'm not an accountant, so my background is as a sort of a business developer. So if you come along here expecting sort of wise advice on treatment of certain VAT situations or anything like that, you're not going to be getting that from me. It's going to be sort of based around the sort of business necessities of business finances. As I say, I'm not an accountant. What we're going to be doing today is focusing sort of mainly on financial planning, really, and looking into the future and how we can anticipate what's going to be coming up in sort of coming 12 months or whatever as we plan out a financial year. It may be, sort of start a bit basic level for some of you who are sort of fairly well established on that. For others, it may be sort of just about bang on. As the guy said at the start here, if you've got any questions going through or any particular points you want to dwell on there, then just sort of flag it up, and we'll try and pick those up as we go. We've got time at the end to deal with additional questions, but often it can be better to sort of deal with them at the time. So just starting off, just a bit of basics on some of the community organisations that I've worked with, which have been across a very wide range of different topics, and the background to a lot of them is normally fairly similar. There's a need, a deficiency, or an opportunity identified, and I mean clearly many food projects started and developed during the COVID period, where there was sort of a great need to help people to access food supplies. I mean, there's other drivers have influenced that as well, obviously cost of living crisis, but just sort of general economic hardships within our local communities. And what we tend to find is that sort of based around that, there will be a bunch of enthusiastic people will organise themselves to take action. Those people will be very, very knowledgeable about their communities, about the service that they're providing. In a number of cases, though, so they can often be less knowledge about some of the business aspects there. So the involvement that I've tended to have with a lot of these organisations is obviously not going in and offering support or advice based around the sort of technical aspect of the service that they deliver, but it is more about sort of bringing them onto a basis whereby they can manage to sustain and develop what they're doing on a sort of sensible commercial basis going forward. And so there are gaps that often emerge in some of these organisations, and often these are around the management of finances. And I mean, certainly when people often approach us and say, do you know anybody locally who sort of might be able to take up a position on our board to help with XYZ? It often is financial expertise and financial nous that people are looking for. I was given a few questions in the brief for this session today, and these I think were things that have been flagged up beforehand, what people might like to learn out of today. So the topic of simple budget management tools, I mean, certainly we'll cover that. Business planning, certainly we'll cover that. What to do when we're struggling to balance the books, yes, we'll sort of stray into that area. Handling non-food pressures, sort of dealing with the costs of premises, energy, waste costs, and then moving on to raising funds and possible growth. I mean, I'm not sure how much time we'll spend on those latter couple of items, but we'll certainly work through the other points there. So as I say, we're focusing today mainly on looking forward and how we can sort of plan and forecast the finances for an organisation. And some of you may have seen this model before, called the plan, do, check, act cycle. And it's a sort of fairly simple framework around which sort of most activities can be managed. And where we're going to be starting there is up in the sort of plan sector, up in the top right hand corner, where we'll be looking at budgeting and developing cash flow forecasts for organisations, and then through into how we sort of, having run the project, deliver the service, how we can record and analyse finances, and then address any issues and learning points, and then background that cycle again. So we're sort of starting at the front end of that, looking at how we developed develop financial plans for an organisation, and then how we can sort of monitor performance against those. Now, organisations that we work with and that I've sort of worked with over time will have levels of expertise varying from very, very rudimentary through to sort of fairly well advanced and polished off. So there'll be a number of you there who are sort of probably sitting up in the top right hand corner here who are using one of the sort of financial software packages maybe to monitor and manage your finances and are fairly comfortable with sort of how you're doing that. Some of the sort of newer and younger projects that I've worked with have been tended to operate around the bottom left of this diagram here with what I've called the sort of biscuit tin finances system. Basically, money comes into the organisation, it goes into the biscuit tin. If anything needs to be bought, the money comes out of the biscuit tin, and when the biscuit tin's empty, there's problems. I suspect you're all sort of well beyond that. The next one up for there is at least keeping some sort of records. Maybe in sort of manual ledger type form or whatever, but that doesn't really matter. Moving on from there, I mean, the sort of bottom right one is sort of use of a basic spreadsheet for capturing information, for categorizing areas of income and expenditure. And then, as I say, sort of top right, we've got various software packages that are available. Wave of hands, any of you there using sort of bespoke finance software? QuickBooks, Zero, couple of nods there, a few sort of doing nothing. So anyway, I mean, I'm approaching this on the assumption that we've got a sort of fair mix here. So if we're starting at a bit too rudimentary, basic basis, then apologies for that. But we'll sort of move on through and look at how we can use whatever tools it is that you are using at the moment to develop sort of robust financial plans. So, as I say, where we'll be focusing here, I'll be basing the input today around a sort of a framework that's just structured around a basic spreadsheet and how we can use that as a framework for developing financial plans. Mandy, Paul, I'd send you a copy of the sort of spreadsheet I'm using here. Has that been sent out to people in advance, or?
I think Paula was going to do it at the beginning of the session, just so that people could open it if they wanted whilst they were in the session to look at it, Paul. I think that's what we agreed, but I don't know, Paula, have you been able to do that, lovely?
No, I've not sent it out to anybody.
No, that's fine. I mean, I've got screenshots of what I'm going through here. So if any of you are interested in using the sort of spreadsheet format that I've got here, then we can send that on to you at the end. And I think there's sort of provision there that if people then want any sort of more specific help on the use and application of that, we can do some follow-up work with that in the future. So we can sort of come back to that. So in terms of looking at where we go with sort of planning the finances within an organisation, obviously a sort of basic forecast that any plan is going to be putting together is of, initially the various sources of income that are coming into the organisation, and we'll sort of look at where money might be coming from and how we might estimate and forecast where the what levels of income might be coming in. The direct and variable costs, which are the ones that will sort of tend to vary with the volume of work that you're doing. So those are ones where maybe, sort of as the volume of work increases, the amount of food you're distributing goes up. Then if you are having to buy in food, then those costs will increase. We'll be looking at the indirect costs or the overheads of the organisation, so the things that will tend to be sort of fixed and probably fairly static through the year. And then finally, the sort of surplus or loss and the overall cash flow. I'll be going through sort of a few thoughts on sort of how you go about that. I know a number of people, and this is not just community organisations, but also commercial businesses as well. So to struggle to look at, well, how do we go about forecasting income levels, expenditure levels, and that sort of thing for a period when a lot of this will be out of our hands. So what I'll be doing is just sort of chatting through a basic sort of framework that we can use here to to sort of estimate it based on a sort of best guess of what the volume of throughput is likely to be. So what we're going to start with then is just sort of sources of income, and I'm sort of working on an assumption here that probably there's going to be sort of three main sources of income that most of you will have. I mean, if there are any other sources, just sort of flag them up. But clearly, a number of you will be sort of reliant on various levels of grant funding from different sources there. So our spreadsheet, when we're putting this together to put together some sort of forecast of future income, we'll have lines in there. So sorry, the M1, M2, M3 across the top, that's just month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4. So including in there just sort of estimates of what the grant funding income might be. It may be that you are running additionally fundraising activities. So, I mean, Jack, I know certainly the food bank has various things that you organise where you're raising money to support the activities you got going on there, whether those are sort of open days, food evenings, raffles, whatever. And also, and this will be different for different ones of you there will be income that you've got maybe from the users of the service that you're providing. So if you're running a pantry, there may be membership costs that you take from people to actually be participants in the scheme in the first place. And then there will be maybe income coming from each time a person visits the shop and pays an amount to sort of make a visit and go away with some food there. So how do we estimate those items? Well, there's sort of different levels of certainty really around the different points on here. So with the funding, it may be that we've got sort of certain elements there that are confirmed. We know that sort of funder A has maybe already committed to providing £5,000 of funding to us at the start of the financial year. It may be sort of funder B there has got we've got an application in there. We're not certain whether it's going to be coming through or not, but there'll be different levels of certainty. And I think the important thing, and I'll be coming back to this again, is that when we're putting together some sort of forecast like this for cash flow within the business, is you keep reminding yourself it is just a forecast. It's not reality. It really is not actually going to happen like this, but it's sort of this initial point in time. It's probably the best guess you've got of how things might shape up. In terms of fundraising activities, then if you are scheduling activities based on sort of previous experience, you may know that we're likely to be generating £500 from this sort of drop-in supper that we're organising in June or whatever. But again, I mean, these are all sort of guesstimates you're putting together. In terms of the next one here, the sort of sales line, when I show you the sort of spreadsheet later on, there's a separate page on it here where for the variable costs, I've just put together a sort of framework there that can be used to try and estimate the amount of money that's likely to be coming in. So if you are charging membership fees, and I gather this is sort of the case for sort of pantries and shops and things like that, there will be an annual fee that people pay for a sort of a card that they come in and use to identify themselves. So you'll know what the sort of unit price is. You'll know what the amount each person will be paying for that is. The next one there is sort of, so how many payments of this are we going to be getting per month? Now, it may be that the scheme you're running actually operates on an annual renewal. So it may be that all of your income here actually comes in 1 month. Or it may just be spread through the year as people either renew or join the scheme afresh. Now, again, most of this can be based on sort of past experience of what's happened in previous years, or your best guess of what's likely to happen. The basis that I tend to work on with a lot of sort of small commercial businesses that I work with is, to say, if you hit your upper target, of what the best you thought was absolutely possible in terms of numbers of customers per month that you'd be coming in and coming in and paying this amount, what would that be? And, you know, in the worst possible case, what's the absolute minimum you would expect to be achieving here in the course of a month, and then sort of steering a path midway in between there. So, I mean, you see the way I've structured this is assuming that you're charging £10 membership. On average, you've got 30 either new members or renewing members paying their contribution each month, and so you got an income of £300 a month there. Similarly with shop sales. So once again, I understand that, you know, so those of you who are running pantries or whatever, there'll be an amount of money that people will pay when they come in, and I mean, does it sort of tend to be a fixed amount? But again, you know, we can look at ways that you can vary this and handle this, but working there on assumption that there's a sort of an average spend per customer. So it may be a fixed amount that everyone who comes in pays a fixed amount, and then they go away with a bag full of food, sort of based around that. It may be a variable amount, in which case what needs to be done is to sort of put down there a figure for what the average customer would spend. And then once again, on the next line there, the number of customer visits that you would expect in any given month, sort of leading to your eventual income. So how are these? So how do we go about estimating this? Well, I mean, it would, you know, if you've got experience of having run your schemes over a few years, then you'll know what's been happening in the past. You'll know what the likely outcome is. You'll also possibly know what you know, what factors may be influencing it. You know, are there people under more pressures at the moment? Are we expecting more people to join the scheme? Are we expecting people to visit more regularly? So these guesstimates will be based probably around past performance, what's been achieved in the past, and then sort of plus or minus a percentage or a figure there to account for sort of variations that may be occurring in the coming year. I mean, in terms of pricing, how are they set? I mean, that's something I'm going to come back to later. It's always a sensitive issue. I mean, certainly with the small private commercial businesses that I work with, there's a natural tendency, I mean, certainly among people who are sort of starting up new ventures, to want to charge low prices to try and attract people to use their organisation. And I mean, certainly in community ventures like yours, where you're providing a service to the customer, you're going to want to try and keep prices as low as possible, so that people will derive maximum benefit from it. But there does obviously become a tension there where, you know, if the organisation is under financial pressure itself, then compromises have to be made there. But we'll come back to that. Come back to that later. Direct costs. So this is the sort of bit down the bottom here. What are the items that you have to buy in to keep the thing going? So it may be that in any given month you're having to shell out a certain amount of money on purchasing food. How do you estimate that? Again, past experience will be a guide here. What I've done there is sort of put in one way that we might estimate that, and that's to say that, well, for the food purchases, we'd assume that would sort of be at 80% of the value of the income level there. So if you sort of see the line there with income for that month 500, we'll assume that in that month we'll have had to shell out about 80% of that in purchasing food to actually service that need. And there may be other random stuff that you buy, you know, sort of bags for people to take the stuff away in. So that one's estimated at 10%. We finish up with sort of total direct costs there of £440. So, you know, the direct costs will vary depending on the levels of sales turnover. It may be that separating these costs out from the other overheads is not actually helpful for you. It's the way that most commercial organisations would set up their accounts, so that they'd have the sort of the direct and variable costs as a separate item there, and then the overhead costs accounted for separately. You don't have to do it that way. You may just choose to incorporate those in with the fixed costs as well. So moving on, then we're then on to the overheads for the organisation. What are they? Well, it's anything that's sort of fairly fixed entity. I've sort of pulled these from some of my own organisation's costs, and you will have your own. I mean, that's probably a reasonably comprehensive list of the sort of costs that you may have there. So costs related to building, utilities, insurance. If you have paid staff, their salaries, tax and national insurance costs, and any pensions. Memberships of things like Fair Share and any other memberships that you have there. Occasional things like the purchase of equipment, any consumables that you need to buy, and then some of the admin costs around it. So you're having to pay someone to look after your payroll for you. Do you have a cost of an accounting package that you have to pay out regularly? Communications and marketing costs, any other costs. So these, are going to tend to be based on sort of month by month estimates, probably based on past performance. Certainly this is the way for the organisations I'm involved in running would tend to do is look at what happened this year, what is likely to happen next year, and what are the factors that could influence things going forward. So price increases, so we know that utility costs are about to go up again. So if our costs last year were a certain level, we can certainly, I think it was 8%. The cost cap was just announced, obviously for business energy contracts, they can vary a bit more. So are there price increases on the way? Are there greater demand? So is that going to be sort of putting greater pressure on us? Have we managed to make any cutbacks or savings which could actually reduce some of these costs? And based on that, you'll be sort of finishing up with an estimate maybe for the year of where the costs are going to occur, how much they're going to be month by month. And you see, for most of the year, the assumptions that I've made there are, sort of fairly flat figures month on month for the amount of money that you're going to be spending there. Some items will be, sort of occurring in specific months. So maybe the sort of Fair Share membership scheme charges its money all up front. Your insurance will become due in a particular month. Other costs will sort of occur at various times throughout the year. So once again, I mean, these are all sort of guesstimates, but it's just providing you with a framework for how the costs are likely to fall in the course of the year. On then to sort of the sort of outfall of all of this is sort of down the bottom of the spreadsheet that you'll be getting is sort of what's happening in terms of profit, loss, and cash flow. So each month you will have a figure which says, well, this month the profit or the loss is going to be a sort of certain figure there. One that's flagged there might, minus 490 quid. Importantly there though is the bank balance and what you've actually physically got in reserves at the end of that month. And so that's the figure that's sort of probably going to be of most interest, most concerning to you as you're sort of managing the business. So in terms of forecast, what is it that we're actually looking for? I mean, clearly sort of monthly cash flow, is it positive or negative? I mean, that's important to understand what's happening within the month. Bank balances and reserves. I mean, I assume that all of you would probably have a sort of target level that you'd like to try and keep your reserves above. If it falls below 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, whatever it is, then at what level do we start to become concerned about it? Are there any individual budget lines that are too high or too low? What sort of picture is being painted here? But remember, as I said earlier, this is only a forecast. It's a guess of what's going to be happening in the course of the year at the moment. The other thing we should be doing at this point is, having sort of been through and put together guesstimates of what's going to be happening in the course of the year, is to start looking at what variations might there be, and what might the effect of that be? And so sort of based on the spreadsheet I'll be sending out to you, there is a what if page on there where it's got a few examples there. So for example, in the picture that you've got there in the middle there, the most likely column, as I've called it, that is the sort of basic figure that's sort of fed across from those spreadsheets saying what the income and what the expenditures would be there. And I've then put in sort of guesstimates there for what might happen should, on the left hand side, the income reduce by 10% or income increase by 10%, and what the sort of outfall of that would be. And on the right hand side, what would happen if costs increased by 10% or costs decreased by 10%, and the overall impact there. I think at the business planning stage, so at the start of the year, when you're beginning to look at what might be happening in the course of the year, this is an important process to go through, because inevitably the actual outturn of what's going to happen in the year is not going to be exactly what you've forecast. And it's important to understand where the sensitivities here may lie. So, you know, if we did lose out and one of our grant funders either cut back the amount they were scheduling to give us, or you know, they didn't come through for us at all, what would happen? If the costs of specific items started to raise significantly, what would the impact of that be? And I'll sort of take us to the spreadsheet a bit later and just look at sort of how that might vary. I mean, clearly there are other factors you can sort of investigate here. And as once you've got your basic spreadsheet of what the likely outturn for the year is going to be, you can sort of vary individual lines on it and make different assumptions about what is going to be happening in the course of the year. So, I mean, next question then is, if once we've looked at what the picture for the coming year is, then if things are looking concerning, or it's looking like there are points in there where it's going to be a bit of a pinch, where the money's at risk of running out at any stage, then what are the things that we may be able to do about that? You know, so would attracting more or sort of limiting it so that we've got fewer customers coming into the user service, would that help us? Do we need to be looking at more ways of raising our own funds, whether that's through specific fundraising projects or activities, or whether it's through seeking additional grant funding from other sources? Is it through cost cutting? Is there stuff on there where actually we may be able to do without some of the stuff that we've got on there? Are they sort of nice to haves, but perhaps not entirely necessary? Are there opportunities in there whereby we could negotiate cost reductions? You know, are we renting premises where the landlord is, or the sort of building owner is sympathetic to our cause and might be prepared to give us a rent reduction for a period? Are there any sort of value-added services that we might be able to provide? So based on the expertise that we have here, are there other activities whereby we could sort of perhaps sell services to the general public, or sort of add in additional fundraising activities that could generate cash for the business? And then perhaps sort of more contentiously, should we be looking at increasing the prices for the various parts of the service that we provide? So, I mean, looking at those, which of them are the easiest to do? Which of them are the most effective? And which ones on the list there are completely out of the question? The one I sort of often come back to here is the issue of pricing. I mean, what's for those of you who are making charges for the services that you provide, how sensitive is that as an issue? Is it something that is sort of an out of the question thing that you would never increase the price of the services that you're providing, or is that something that if push came to shove, then it is something you could consider as a way of bringing extra cash into the business? Anyone got any thoughts on that? Mandy's got a hand up.
I've got my hand up. Only just simply to say, I just thought that was a good point at which to pause and ask people, because obviously, I mean, I've got a view on that, but I think that we have got quite a wide range of projects providing services that are attending today, and it'd be useful to know, what is the position on that? Because some of you may not be making any charges at the minute anyway. Others of you may have like a pantry model, whatever. But I always think that is a really emotive option, and it's something that that discussion around that can be quite an emotive one. So I don't know if anybody's got anything that they want to contribute, but I do think it's a good point, to kind of get some discussion. Paul, thank you.
I'll dive in if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I'm from Freedom Community Project, and we do have a pantry project. We have been in this position where we've had to decide what to do. Obviously, we're all aware that grant funding is few and far between at the moment. And it's always the last thing we say, it's last resort of ever, increasing prices, especially for projects that are aimed at those people that are on their incomes and the vulnerable clients that we serve. So we thought, well, what can we do, because we've got to do something. So at the minute we're just working on additional income streams. So at our project, it sounds very random, but we're having a soft play centre. We got donated a soft play centre, very, very lucky. And it's all been constructed all in-house, trying to keep costs as low as possible. And that is something that we are going to charge for. And it's not necessarily a service that is aimed at our low-income families or our vulnerable clients, but it is something that is going to bring some income in. So for now, we have sort of narrowly avoided upping prices for things like our food pantry. But it, like you say, it is quite a sensitive topic, and it is something that we've had to discuss. But at this moment in time where we've tried to put all of our effort into developing our own income streams, really, so that we're not entirely grant reliant. We will have a core for ourselves.
Thank you. Yeah, great example there, David.
Yeah, we've tried various options. We've looked at corporate finance, what do you call it, sponsorships.
Yeah.
Looked at actually having products on the shelf that were for sale, rather than and we have looked at reducing costs, and we're just trying to work on all three at the same time, being honest, and you still don't balance the books, but it's as much as you can do.
Yeah.
But we did increase prices slightly.
Yeah.
But that went okay. That went problem.
Yeah. I think the important thing here is looking at what the extremes are here, and obviously the worst possible case is that the finances don't stack up, that the losses continue to mount, and if things get really bad, then eventually the service that you're providing disappears altogether, which clearly is something that needs to be avoided. And if the compromise here has to be that there is an increase in the charge that you're making to customers, then perhaps that is the one that needs to be considered. I mean, the example of Corinne's there, which is sort of way off the sort of main purpose of the service you're providing there, but what you've got is an opportunity that's presented itself to you and has provided you a channel through which additional income can be made. And I think sort of being flexible and being open to ideas like that is very, very important. I mean, as the point you made there with grant funding there just being sort of so tight at the moment, the moves made by Derbyshire County Council basically taking out the sort of various discretionary funding routes available, the pressures that have come back on all the other funders that we've depended on over the years. It's a really difficult climate that we're operating in, isn't it? And I think that is where it is very important to have a clear understanding of what the financial picture for the coming 12 months is likely to be, and what are the levers that we do have that we can pull that can make a difference to how it's going to operate. Anyone else got any? John, is that a hand up there? You're muted. John, are you talking to us?
Yeah,
Hello.
yeah.
There we
Hello.
go.
Yeah, sorry about that. Actually, it's put up the wrong name. It's Kevin, but don't worry
Hi,
about
Kevin.
that. I put that in the comment field. Basically, it is looking at some of our cost overheads. We run a very robust food bank service. We operate 7 days a week from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's fairly comprehensive. We have no referral system. We actually deal directly with the individuals and the families who come and express they have a need. One of the things, or some of the areas that could be explored by other providers, we've already explored them, is yes, corporate sponsorship, corporate involvement on a local level. For example, we run a vehicle which is critical to the service, but we have a local corporate who actually provides the vehicle to us. The only thing that we put in that vehicle is the diesel. The local corporate purchases the vehicle, services it, MOTs it, insures it, etc. So we've looked at reducing our overheads by working with corporate partners. The other area is finding a amenable landlord, because we're all in kind of like different types of venues, whether we rent or whether we lease those venues. I would recommend going down the kind of like lease rental route, because how we actually operate that is, yes, the premises are in our name, and because it's in our name as a charity, basically we will then get the charity rate on the business rates. So we reduce the business rates significantly as against paying a straight rent to the landlord. And sometimes we have a couple of properties we use for various purposes. We actually get the landlord to actually give us a corporate donation to help pay the peppercorn rent that they may be charging us, because in essence, it could be a vacant premise that they've got, and we see a vacant premise, we move on it, because the first thing we can say is we can save you a significant amount of money on your business rates if you actually allow us to become involved with that property. So it's selling every benefit in all the different directions to reduce our own service costs.
Yeah, thanks for that. And it's, I think the provision of food and the sort of dealing with this as an issue is one that can be quite attractive to corporate sponsors. I don't know how much success you've had, David. You're talking about approaching them as well as a way of doing this, but I was certainly working with a number of organisations in North East Derbyshire that we have been doing. There are a few projects there that become extremely good at working with corporate sponsors who are sort of getting back out of that reputational benefits because of the linkage with the projects that they're supporting. I mean, the point you made there, Kevin, about the sort of business rates issue is absolutely right, that you can save a landowner money by occupying the premises for them. I love the idea of getting sponsorship so they actually pay their own rent. That's a
well, it basically, I put it on the basis of 100% business rates. If I save you 80%, and therefore there's 20% to be paid, how about sharing a little of your profit, because you're you're still having the ownership. And I mean, I've had some premises up to 200,000 square feet. And that's a big saving to the owner. And yes, the agreement is if they find a new business to lease their premise to, I agree to move out quite quickly and quite smoothly.
So if you need someone to negotiate your rent, then Kevin's your man by the sounds of it.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
it is quid
Yeah.
pro quo.
Yeah. But just the point about having the property in your name as well. I mean, if you are operating out of smaller premises, then it may be that you just finish up paying zero business rates anyway. I mean, certainly you would get sort of probably an 80% charitable discount, but they would also manage to lose the rest of it as well. Jacqueline, you've had your hand up for forever. There you are. Talk to us. Hello.
Sorry, I was just checking the my microphone was on. Yeah, so just my little bit of contribution to this sector, really. You know, looking at that pavement wall there in the
Jacqueline, you come across a bit muffled. Are you a long way away from the microphone on your laptop there, or
that better.
much better?
Yeah. So yeah, I was just looking at that grey one in particular, the value add services where potentially you could charge for those. So that's I'm really that's got my cogs turning as ever. I mean, what did occur to me though is something that we do at the food bank is although we don't charge for guest agencies to come in to our food bank, I mean, you might think, well, they could charge us to have them there, or we could charge them to have access to that audience, but because it's a mutually kind of reciprocal relationship there, isn't it? Everybody's benefiting from that, especially our clients. No money exchanges hands, so what I really like about that is that it's free to us, it's free to them, our clients benefit. So ultimately, that's kind of it. Increase the value of our service. So although we haven't generated any income from it, but I kind of see that as a potentially when we are applying for those, funding bids, and putting our grant applications in, it's like an extra string to the bow. Does that make sense? So it's like maybe that would help us to be successful in an application. I'd like to think so.
I mean, certainly a lot of funders will want to see evidence that the service you're providing is going to be sustainable once you've spent the grant fund you're being given. I think what you're describing there is a good way of demonstrating that.
Or trying to. I guess it's one way to kind of prove that it is money well spent as well, because it's going to worthwhile cause, and we can hopefully demonstrate and provide evidence, statistics, and all that business. So to have that I guess the backup, isn't it? It's like the extra backup that we are working alongside other organisations. And so maybe it was just a thought that occurred to me that maybe the other people on this call might be able to think about too, if they aren't already doing it. I'm sure most people are. It's just I thought I'd voice it to contribute a little bit. But thank you for your time.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if you saw one of the messages came up there while Jack was talking from Jenny, talking about having just saved her landlord's 50 grand a year on business rate. So certainly good incentive for getting reductions on rental payments there.
Actually, you mentioned citizen advice, although I must clarify that is a paid for service. So I was thinking about the other agencies as well. But absolutely, value, money well spent as well. Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other thoughts there on ways of saving, increasing income, or things that you would focus on or not? Okay, a couple more slides, and then I was just going to sort of pitch into the spreadsheet I've been using there as a. So I'm about
one quick one. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking there, are we, I mean, because I used to run a business myself, but, people always used to say, well, Jack, you're not charging enough. You're running a business, not a charity. And obviously now I'm working at a charity, and I never think to, charge people, but we do have something where we do interactive food bank assembly. We go out to schools and, would you say that might be something that the schools might be willing to pay for if we had a reasonable charge for it?
I find schools very difficult to deal with, and this is from a couple of projects that I've been involved with over the years. It's they will always sort of plead poverty and that they've got no control over their budgets. But I mean, they do have money. Yeah, I mean, it's worth having a go. They pay for other services. They pay for other inputs. Then, you know, why shouldn't they be making a contribution to projects like yours? It's certainly worth looking at.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks for that. And it never occurred to me to charge for it. To be honest, I just always thought because we're a charity and we don't charge our clients. But no, it's really food for thought. So thank you very much.
Okay. Any other thoughts before we move on? So I would just sort of back to where we came in here. We've been talking there about sort of budgeting, cash flow forecasting. Then moving on, we sort of run the project, we record and analyze the finances, and that's the point where we then start to address issues and deal with learning points. What is it we're actually looking for here? I mean, the way in which you'll be recording the actual performance month on month probably sort of fairly similar to that in which you've sort of developed the forecasts in the first place. But the key thing here is on looking at how you actually put in place the management around that. How often do you review it? Is it a monthly thing? Do you have monthly management meetings to review this? And looking at the criteria upon which you're going to be taking further action. I mean, if it's a fairly stable picture that you've got, where you've got sort of fairly fixed outgoings, fairly stable levels of throughput, you know where it is you stand, then it's not something that's going to exercise you overly on a month-to-month basis. But are there certain things that would trigger action there? So if you know there's a variation to plan greater than a certain amount, if the balance or reserves dip below a certain amount, if there are unexpected costs that have suddenly occurred, you know, maintenance costs or repair costs, something like that, above a certain amount, or if there was a reduction in income due to a funder taking money off the table or less money from the charges that you're making. What are the criteria that you're going to use in which is sort of to trigger some of the action that you're going to be taking there? Now, in terms of input on the actual planning side of it, that was all I was going to go through there. The one thing I was just going to do was to take a look at the. So, are you seeing the spreadsheet that I've put up there? Yeah. Okay. Thanks, David. So, I mean, I'll send you a copy of this. I mean, for those of you that have got sort of pretty robust financial packages that you're using, if you're using QuickBooks or Xero or something like that, you're probably not going to need to use this. I mean, in actuality, I mean, two of the organisations that I run, so Clown Enterprise, the sort of business support agency, and the Loudsey Green Community Trust, the community centre that I'm involved in. We both use Xero. I really like that as a sort of financial package. It sort of gives me a very good picture of what's going on. But we do at the start of each year still put together a cash flow forecast based on an Excel spreadsheet here that we can sort of chart out what we think is going to be happening and then play a few tunes with it to look at what the impact of variations are likely to be. So I mean, the various sections of this are basically what I've taken you through there. So the income up the top here, overhead costs here, vary through the year. There's a sales page here, so this is where you put together your estimates of what the income due to the various sources are, and then what the direct costs are. And then this was the what ifs page. So, you know, if your income reduced by X percent, if your income increased by whatever percent, and if you want to play tunes with this, then you can just go on to that and sort of change the number there. So if we change the costs increasing by 10% up to 20%, then we can look at the impact that has. So you know, the impact that's had is sort of increase the amount we're actually losing that month. If it went up to say 30% due to rampant inflation or energy costs, then, you know, suddenly our bank balance has gone into the negative for that particular year. And it's something you can do on each of the various pages here, is go through, sort of play tunes with the numbers there, and just look at the impact it's likely to have if there are higher levels of income through to, due to grant funding or grants disappearing off of the table, increases in energy costs or whatever. You can dump those in there, take a look at the impact that it has on that, and then consider are there provisions we need to be putting in place there to mitigate against the potential losses that might be occurring there. So as I say, I'll get this sent over to you, and if it's useful to you, then just feel free to use it. If you need it tweaking or twiddling, then sort of let us know and we can do that. And so I think there's sort of provision there that if any of you sort of do want to sort of discuss in a bit more detail ways in which you can put together forecasting systems, I think that sort of ability is there. Anyway, let's stop sharing that, and we'll back in the room now. I think at that point I'll sort of probably open up, and if any of you have got any sort of questions or other points that you want to make, let's pitch into them now.
It was great, Paul. Thanks ever so much. I'm just going to say to people, obviously, put your hand up if you want to come in, ask questions. I've sort of made a few notes as we've gone through of certain things, but I want to open the floor up to everyone else first. So there's certainly a lot of food for thought there, if you pardon the pun. How? Do you want me to just kick off with some things that occurred to me, sort of the questions, Paul? And I think, so, and again, please jump in, everyone. As you were talking about, doing this sort of predictions, there was a part of me said, I know that projects that I've worked with over the last 5 years, some of them would say, well, why bother? Because as you say, Paul, it's a guesstimate. It's not real. It's like playing around with figures. And when they push for time, it's this sort of, well, why bother wasting time on that? Because we know we're always strapped for cash. Does that make sense? And sometimes that is a reaction. And I suppose it's about having a response to that. I suppose my response to it, particularly at the moment, is that it's so important that we do take a view and that we do know, even if it's a bit scary when we think that the money's going to dry up, because there isn't always the grant funding option now. And we have got to look at sustainability. But I don't know if anybody's got any views on that or ways that they've negotiated that quite difficult internal dilemma. Because certainly, I can imagine some projects would say, oh, this is too scary. I can't go there. I just go day. As you say, Paul, it's the biscuit tin thing. It's just go day to day and progress like that. So I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts on that. Stunned them into silence, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just my own comment on that is yes, it is guesstimating. It is sort of, there are going to be variations there, and you're never going to know exactly what's going to happen. But I think by putting together some sort of financial forecast for the year, it gives you a picture, hopefully, what the most likely outcome is, and it gives you a picture of what could happen if things vary in one direction or the other, either on the income side or on the cost side. And it's just preparation, isn't it? It's being in a position where you can respond to these things, and knowing that things are maybe varying a bit versus what it is that you'd expected to be happening based on your plan there. It's any plan is only as good as the assumptions on which you've based it, and if the assumptions are out, then it's it's not going to be very helpful. But Sally, you've got a hand up there.
Yeah, only to say we're a relatively new pantry, and we did quite a bit of forecasting and looking at different scenarios before we started, and we are finding it really useful to revisit that, even so much as on a weekly basis. We've become quite obsessed by the figures, I suppose, but it's really helping us to find that point where we know we can be sustainable and understanding what the impact is if we don't have as many shoppers one week, or if we have a sudden increase in members. It's really helped us to kind of control things and keep things steady as we're growing. So it's something that we'll definitely be continuing.
Yeah.
Plus, you know, I don't know, maybe I'm a bit nerdy with numbers, but you see things going in the right direction from those figures, and it gives you that little boost that actually, yeah, you're doing the right thing. You know,
Yeah.
it confirms that what you thought was going to work will work, or maybe you thought it would work and it's actually impacted negatively. So you know straight away to do something about it rather than just let it go.
Yeah. Yeah, it gives you, and it gives you reassurance as well. I think confidence that you know, things are secure for the time being, and certainly with the community centre that we run, you know, we've sort of kept rental costs there down to a sort of reasonable level, and you know, in most years over the last sort of 5-6 years, we've not had to raise prices at all because you know, we've had confidence in the finances and the outcomes that we're forecasting there. Edge Ministries, are you waving hands there?
Yes, sorry, I can't see a hand button on our version of Zoom. So just wanted to say that we do a certain level of cash forecasting, particularly for the pantry, and grant funders and corporates do like to see it before they hand over a big cheque. So anyone who's thinking it's not worth it or I can't justify the time, sometimes putting in the hours does give you some zeros on the end of a cheque. So and account for that in your fundraising as well. We've got to the point of always including in our fundraising bids the cost of the application. We let funders know how much it costs us to apply for their grants, and we let organisations know that as well. It's starting to work, I think. They do let you have project management costs and fundraising costs, so include that in your application and just add the extra couple of grand on the top.
It would.
That's
it would be nice if it would be nice if there was a response to that where some of them made the application processes a bit simpler and avoided some of the unnecessary information that they asked for as well. But I've not seen that.
We've seen a couple. I think there are some big grants going out at the moment that are designed to put off organisations of our size, which is the problem. There is a lot of money floating around, but it's clearly aimed at big boys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a really good point you make there. But the ability to demonstrate sort of financial stability, financial confidence is attractive to not just to grant funders, but to corporate funders as well. They don't want to be associated with something that's just going to go belly up in the first 6 months. They want to be associated with successful projects that has been seen to be doing good work over a long period of time, and the ability to
and our point of sale system gives us that sales data as well.
Right.
So when they come in and say how many people are coming through, we can tell them how many people have come through the door that month really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And that helps, you know, optimize that chance donation.
Yeah. I think Charlotte wants to come in, Paul. I don't know if there's anyone else. I know Charlotte's been waiting. So
yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really just following on from Sally and Al, really, and Al kind of hit the nail on the head about how powerful it is to include things like your own forecasting in your funding bids. And Sally, even though you might have called yourself a nerd, when Paula and I received your information to get funding from the Pantries programme that we administer for Derbyshire County Council, in seeing that you'd already done all that work gives a huge amount of confidence to us, and we think, yeah, you know, you absolutely, you know what you're doing, and yes, as you said yourself, it might not necessarily go that way, but you're planning for that, and you've got options to adapt and change, you know, and we found that fantastic. And you're not on your own, obviously. You know, Al's mentioned the forecasting work that they do, and there are other pantries and food banks that do the same. And I think obviously what we're doing today and what we're hoping to do again in the future is to take some of your great examples and then try and kind of try and sort of seep that into the other projects that maybe aren't there yet. So we might be knocking on your door to do a bit of a case study for how you have done that recently, just so that, you know, when another project does want to start up, it isn't quite as scary, especially if they're not
Yeah.
a numbers nerd like
Yeah.
you call yourself.
Yeah, it was something that we knew right from what we had been doing, which were community shops that weren't sustainable. Whatever we went into, you know, whatever that developed into, it had to be possible to run it as sustainably as we could, because it had been costing so much when we were running the shops. So yeah, it was a big thing for us. And like the point you made about funding bids, private companies as well, they do want to see that you are putting that time in, I think, don't they? And that you're serious about what you're doing. Even our local parish council that gave us some funding for our first storage cabinet, you know, they wanted to see all the numbers for a very low cost donation. And I think we, in a way, providing that and putting that effort in, it's that professional sort of outlook, isn't it, with everything? And people see you and think, well, yeah, actually, they're putting the time in, they're putting the effort in. So,
yeah. Mandy.
I just want to come in on Sally's point, because I think that was excellent, Sally. And I think what you're saying there is if it becomes routine, if it's what you do, then obviously it's part and parcel of your day to day. And then you notice it less. You don't have to invest a huge amount of time because you're doing it incrementally. And then what that does show is that you've got that professionalism, and that shows in then the proposals that you put forward. Because I think you're right. The reality is that sustainability is something that, you know, I've worked in with local government for years, and it's always something that every time they give you money out, they've got to look at sustainability. But we have got to be realistic here that we're not running businesses as in profit-making businesses. We're running businesses that what we want to do is for them to, at best, to break even. And so grant funding's always got to be something that we, you know, enable projects that we're working with, enable them to do and support them to do. So, you know, there's got to be a sense of realism as well. Yes, we want projects to be as robust as possible, but I think there's never going to be a time when we're not going to be needing top-up funds from grant organisations. That's just the reality of the sector that we work in. And, you know, the sooner that's out on the table, the better. But as Paul says, at the moment, the climate, the context we're working in is a very fraught one, and it's rapidly changing because obviously, particularly in Derbyshire, you've got all the changes that have been happening in terms of regional government, and there's more to come. So I think we're not going to get much stability for a few years. And some of the national funders, and I thought that was a really interesting point. I think it was Al that made about the fact that sometimes some of the bigger funders, it's quite complex, and then that does deter smaller projects from applying. So maybe that's something that, I mean, I'll look to Charlotte and Paula for this, but maybe that's something that Feeding Derbyshire can look to try and mitigate a little bit. Maybe there's a role there for looking at whether it's a template production or whether it's something that we can support with, because I do think that's really unfortunate if projects walk away from potential funding because it's just too hard. It's on the too hard pile. So just a couple of points I was picking up there as people were talking, and I think that's generated quite a decent discussion, because I like some of the responses that were given to the why bother question that I posed, you know, because obviously we should bother, but sometimes people will say, well, why bother? But obviously, hopefully today, some of the tools that Paul's talked us through that will help people pull with that. And we'll be sharing that obviously with the wider network as well. Well, thanks for those contributions. Have we got anybody else wanting to come in? Any other? Oh yeah, thanks. Over to you. Is that Storehouse? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hiya, David. Nice to see you again. Hiya.
Yeah, so what I was going to comment on really was it's very easy to just bury our head in the sand, isn't it? And it's so important that even if we are running as negative, at least if we know how much we've got in the bank, we know how long we can last before the next bit of money comes in from wherever. At least we know that we're managing the difficult side as well as a good side of doing what we're doing. It's better to know and being able to know what you can fill, what you need to fill. Because at the end of the day, it's damn sight easier to go to someone and say, hey, unless we've got X, we're going to close. If you don't know your number, how are they going to say yeah?
Absolutely. I think that's very eloquently put. Thank you, David. Did you say you can't be an ostrich? Jenny, do you want to come back in on that? Thanks, David.
It's not necessarily on that. It's just a comment and advice with grants. I mean, I think because we have to rely on grants because of just time with the volunteers that you have. You know, if not everyone's got the volunteers to run a profit-making shop or venture on side it to make it sustainable. But I think one thing that we've learned is it's never too early to apply for a grant. We were running a financial inclusion service and we had a grant for 3 years. I've started to get edgy after 2 years, thinking I don't want it to end. So I started ringing up funders and asking, you know, when can we be applying, and found out we could apply then for money for a year away. So although we didn't do the application in the end, it went through Citizens Advice as a joint venture and they put it in to do with our charity number. But I started that process a year in advance of needing the money. And it worked, and they took us on, and we got another 3-year grant. And so we've had another 3-year grant 6 months prior to the old one running out.
And that's again, it links in with what Paul's talked about today, and David's point about if you bury your head, you don't know. So therefore, if you do know what your situation is, you can start that process, and the sooner the better, really. From what you know, that's basically the advice.
Yeah, you don't wait till it's run out.
Soon.
You've got a month to go.
No,
you know,
no.
a year before you think it's going to run out, and you want the project to continue. Ask funders. Many of them are happy that you're wanting to show that level of sustainability a year in advance, and will set you aside that money to do it. So, you know, it's worth asking.
Definitely. And it does avoid that crisis management. I think, you know, I hate to raise the dreaded COVID word, but I think during COVID, we did get used to more of that crisis. You know, the crisis funding was there, whereas now that's just not available to any degree. And so you have got to be forward planning, and hopefully, as I say, the sort of processes that Paul's shared with us today, I think were really useful. I really like the scenario planning. I think I'm with Sally on that. I love to look at, well, what happens if this happens and what happens if that, and know the worst case scenario as well, you know, if we're lucky and we get a bit of surplus, then that will look like that. And I think that's really, you know, a useful way, and it looks a relatively simple way of putting some numbers in and crunching to see where you're at. So yeah, thanks ever so much, Jenny. Thank you for that. Anybody else?
Interesting
Paul,
point in the chat box from Emma talking about relationships with schools.
Yes.
And that had some success there in approaching them and saying that some will find room in budgets to make a contribution there, and also some will sort of then ask parents for contributions for certain voluntary activities beyond that, in supporting activities like charities and foundations. There's some interesting stuff in the chat box if you've not been looking at it, folks.
Yeah, there is. And I think you're right, Paul. I think it's about widening out. Obviously, food projects, you know, they are part of our communities, and just like schools are, just like, you know, the local shops or whatever. And it's really important, I think, that we don't see them in that very niche or isolated way. And I think you can engage. I love the idea about the soft play that obviously Corinne talked to us about, because you're looking at a very different audience potentially there, to just raise their awareness and their knowledge of what they can do for their local community. So yeah, I think all those sorts of ideas are excellent. Anybody else got any questions, or is there anything that you've not had, you know, that you thought you were going to come along today and get answered that you'd like? Well, we've got Paul, as I said, in the room just for the next 5 minutes or so to answer. Hopefully it will have.
Can I just ask a quick
certainly.
question for
Of course you
those
can,
that have been running for more than a year? We're coming up to our first year end as running a pantry model rather than the food bank we inherited. How do you all, or how have you all represented your stock in your accounts when you come past year end? We're looking at trying to do it at the value that it will go out to the client, but do you estimate that or do you just zero it out?
That's an interesting question. Because obviously I think what Jack's put in there, they do it, obviously they use the fair share model, which is obviously the kilogram, the weight model. As you say, what monetary value would those products have? So that's an interesting one. I haven't got an answer to that, to be honest, but somebody else might have.
David's got a hand up.
David, over to you. Can you?
Yeah, we operate on volume, so we actually, so I know what every rack holds volume wise, so I can compare, I can make that to bags of food, which then evaluates it. Does that help?
Yeah, so you do use a value to the customer.
Yes.
For your stock at your year end. Okay, cool. Thank you.
I think that makes sense, doesn't it? Because it's that's sort of the value to the organisation rather than the sort of bought-in value, which is a bit academic by that point.
Absolutely, bought-in value. But it's whether you zero it off and just write it off straight away, or whether you consider it basically deferred income.
Interesting.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sal. That's an interesting, and yeah, it's caused us all to think a little bit hard about that. I'll come back to that point at the end as well. Any other questions or comments before we start to just sum up? I know Charlotte might want to come in at some point. Just on that, I'll bring you in a minute, Charlotte. I was just going to say on that point, well, that's really leads me into the fact that what the Rural Action Derbyshire Feeding Derbyshire team are looking to do is potentially run some further sessions, potentially with Paul, if he's available, to either bring one-to-one or group sessions together on specific issues. So there won't be like big workshops, but to actually look at some of those nitty-gritty issues. That's similar to what you've just talked about, Al, where you're coming to the end of the first year, you want to round things up. How do you want to get the right processes in place? So it could be that, just an hour of time would, or a couple of hours of time would actually help with that. So I think that's something that certainly, Charlotte, you're going to be looking at, isn't it, to see what's within the budget of the training. So I don't know if you want to come in and say any more about that, but that certainly is a lead into that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I was just going to say, Mandy, is obviously, we've had quite a few projects come along today, and there are others within the network that haven't been able to come. And you'll probably go away, you might, receive the presentation and the spreadsheet, and then something you might think, well, actually, I would like a little bit of help with the planning, or I would like a bit of help specifically with pulling together that bespoke spreadsheet for our own project, or something else that comes to mind, next week or the week after. And as Mandy said, we don't want to see this as the end. We almost want to see it really as the start of a process of support that we can provide. But what we need, I suppose, is you to be giving us that feedback. We've sort of started this process now with what we think you might need, and in this sort of more general session. But what we now really want is for you to come back and let us know really what other support might you want. As Mandy said, is there something specific? That was a really interesting question from Al. There might be some specific questions that we need to do that are pantry specific. There might be things that are food bank specific. So please get in touch and let us know, and we can then tailor something to meet your needs, as opposed to putting things on that maybe don't quite. The other quick thing I was just going to mention, and I'm typing it in the chat now, Kevin mentioned about schools, on the theme of schools, and how lots of schools do Duke of Edinburgh Awards, and obviously there's young people there looking for volunteering opportunities. That's a really, really good point. So would suggest that if people are maybe hoping for, for you're not already connected in with your local schools for donations, you could use that as an opportunity. We do also get contacted by some businesses within Derbyshire around food donations where they want to do food drives themselves. And we also get contacted every now and again by companies who have staff wanting to use their volunteering days to volunteer at food projects. And we are doing a little bit of work on that now as to try and connect some companies up with projects in their own areas. But obviously it's a big county, so we would suggest that if you know businesses in your area and you haven't already given them a tap on the shoulder and said, if you've got people that might want to come and do a bit of volunteering, or would they want to do a food drive as their volunteering days, and then those donations come to you, then that's something you can do. Equally, you could tie up the budgeting issue with the corporate volunteering and see if there's any businesses that maybe have some accountants wanting to use some of their volunteering days up. So it's just thinking about some of those side of things as well.
Just on that, Charlotte, we've been building a couple of corporate relationships over the last year. Having staff who are prepared to attend corporate town halls for a photo op just to receive a big check, or just to talk about what you're doing, or other points to just talk about your projects to the decision makers within organisations is really, really valuable. We managed to get a company's foundation donation up by a factor of 10 just by taking them around and talking about the background of our project and talking about the need in our community. So do dedicate time to it, or whether that's volunteer time or staff time. It can be really valuable, even though to start with it can seem like it's going to be a bit of a wasted opportunity, shaking a hand and taking a bit of paper.
No, but it's the softer stuff, isn't it? Sometimes, Al, that often can yield things you don't an unexpected outcomes.
Particularly companies that have got active corporate social responsibility policies. They really like the soft skills. Yeah. So you factor that in.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, very good point. Well, I'm conscious that we're coming up to time, and I don't know if there's. It seems to me that we've had some really interesting, obviously some very interesting information presented to us by Paul, so thank you for that. I'm going to hand back to Charlotte in a minute to do the formal close, but obviously thank you for your questions as well, and thank you for your contributions. I've certainly made quite a lot of notes, and I think that as a team, when we come back together, there'll be a lot of information that we can perhaps collate that will be a good resource for us as a consequence of this session. But as Charlotte said, we will be using it to develop some follow up as well, and it is for you to really, I think, like Charlotte said, it's for you to drive that. The specifics have got to come from you. We can look at the more generic stuff, we can look at the surveys that we send out and see what's coming back from you, but if you've got specific issues, you need to make us aware of them. So I think without further ado, I'll hand back to Charlotte to round us up, because we are coming up to 2:30. But thank you to everyone from me anyway. Thanks.
Thanks, Mandy, and thank you, Paul. It was really, really useful, and I can really see how you could do a really similar support session, maybe in a one-to-one or a group session, like Mandy said. Using what you've been through today. So yeah, just summing up really. As I said at the start, it's the second of these sustainability webinars. Thanks everyone for coming. I think we did a little tally up, and I think there's been 16 organisations here today, covering 23 different sites around the county. So that's fantastic. It really is vital, and it's really important. And we're kind of really appreciative that you've all come along. Please do, as Mandy said, keep in touch, give us some feedback. Even if what you've maybe seen today was a little off the mark for you, still let us know, and what you might need. the next, Paula will be in touch with the recording from today and also the spreadsheet, and with contact details for if you do want any follow-up support. The next session is in May, and as I said earlier, that will be face-to-face, and hopefully a chance for a lot of you to come along, have a chat, mingle with other projects in your area, or ask some more questions similar to today, but face-to-face. So thanks again for coming along, and yeah, and we'll close now. Thanks, everyone.
Bye all.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye
It's
all.
been lovely to meet you all. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.